From antibiotic-resistant superbugs to insurance billing schemes to discharge plans designed to guarantee you'll be back within a month, hospitals have more traps than a horror movie. And spoiler, some involve surprisingly expensive ice chips. Get this. Hospital errors are responsible for killing more people than strokes, more people than Alzheimer's, and more people than all accidents combined. We're talking about an estimated 250,000 deaths per year in the U.S. alone. That's insanely unlucky when you consider you went to the hospital to get help. But it gets worse. Because beyond the accidental deaths, there's a whole system of traps designed to keep you coming back, rack up charges, and sometimes treat you for things you never actually had. Pretty crazy that the healthcare system can hurt you in so many creative ways. But before we get to the financial nightmares, let's start with the old school trap that's still killing thousands. Every year in American hospitals, more than 1.7 million people catch an infection they didn't walk in with. You go to the hospital with a broken leg, and you leave with a staph infection that could literally kill you. And here's the really messed up part. About 99,000 of those people die from these hospital-acquired infections. That's like a sold-out football stadium worth of people who got killed by the place that was supposed to save them. And it happens at hospitals you've probably heard of. Johns Hopkins, Cleveland Clinic, even the Mayo Clinic deals with this. The biggest culprits? MRSA, which is a nasty antibiotic-resistant staph infection that absolutely loves hospital environments because it's evolved to survive there. C. diff, which is short for Clostridioides difficile, and it gives you such severe diarrhea that it can literally kill you through dehydration. And catheter-associated urinary tract infections because apparently nobody told hospitals that tubes going into your body need to be absolutely sterile. Charming. You'd think preventing this stuff would be pretty straightforward, right? Wash your hands, sterilize equipment, follow basic hygiene protocols that we've known about since the 1800s. But get this. Studies from Johns Hopkins show that healthcare workers only wash their hands about 40% of the time they're supposed to. Less than half. That means more than half the time doctors and nurses are touching patients with hands that just touched another patient, a doorknob, or who knows what else. I mean, come on. We teach kindergartners to wash their hands before snacks, but somehow grown adults with medical degrees can't be bothered to follow the single most important rule in medicine. And it gets worse, because beyond infections, hospitals mess up in even more creative ways. Wrong site surgeries happen about 40 times a week in America. That's when a surgeon operates on the wrong body part or even the wrong patient. In 2008, a man named Willie King in Florida went in for surgery to amputate his diseased right leg. The surgeon amputated his healthy left leg instead. Both legs gone, because nobody double-checked the chart. But my personal favorite, retained surgical instruments. That's the fancy medical term for when surgeons literally leave stuff inside your body after surgery. Sponges, clamps, scissors, retractors. In one case in Seattle, a woman named Pat Skinner had a 13-inch metal retractor left in her abdomen for years after surgery. That's basically a metal ruler just chilling in your stomach cavity. That's comforting. And all of this is happening because of simple, preventable mistakes. We're not talking about complex medical mysteries or experimental procedures. We're talking about basic stuff like counting your tools before you close someone up, or washing your hands. But infections from dirty hands? That's almost quaint compared to what happens when hospitals start treating you for things you don't actually have. And then there's the diagnostic cascade, which is when hospitals find something that probably doesn't matter and then can't stop themselves from investigating it. It's like a medical version of falling down a rabbit hole, except the rabbit hole costs thousands of dollars and might actually hurt you in the process. Here's how it works. You go in for a routine checkup. Everything's fine. Doctor orders a CT scan just to be safe, maybe because you mentioned some chest tightness. The scan finds a tiny nodule on your thyroid. Now here's the thing. About 50% of people over 50 have thyroid nodules, and roughly 90% of them are completely harmless. They'll never grow, never cause symptoms, never do anything except sit there. But once it shows up on a scan, doctors feel legally and ethically obligated to investigate. So now you get a biopsy. They stick a needle in your throat and pull out some cells. The biopsy comes back indeterminate, which is medical speak for, we have no idea what this is, so let's do more stuff. More tests, more imaging, maybe another biopsy with a bigger needle, and eventually you're looking at surgery to remove part of your thyroid, even though that nodule was statistically never going to hurt you. Congratulations, you went in feeling perfectly fine and left with a permanent medical condition requiring daily thyroid hormone medication for the rest of your life. This happens all the time. Incidental findings on CT scans lead to about 40% of patients getting follow-up procedures they don't actually need. And it's not just thyroid stuff. Low-risk prostate cancer that would never spread gets treated with surgery that can leave you with permanent erectile dysfunction and incontinence. Tiny lung nodules trigger biopsies that can puncture your lung and cause a pneumothorax. It's like taking your car in for an oil change and leaving with a new transmission you didn't need because the mechanic found something while he was in there. The numbers are pretty insane. An estimated 10 to 20 million unnecessary medical procedures happen in America every single year. That includes surgeries, imaging tests, biopsies, and interventions that either don't help or actively make things worse. And we're not talking about obvious scams or fraud. We're talking about well-meaning doctors who've been trained to believe that more medicine is always better medicine, that catching everything early is always the right call, even when early means catching things that would never become problems. So you're sicker because they tried to help. Pretty wild, right? But at least those doctors are trying to help, even if they're being overly cautious. That's way better than what happens when hospitals start thinking about money instead of medicine. Here's where things get really insane, because we're not just talking about doctors making honest mistakes anymore. We're talking about hospitals that are literally designed to extract as much money as possible from sick people. And they've got it down to a science. Let's start with a fun little game hospitals play called Observation Status. When you're in the hospital, you can either be officially admitted or placed under observation. And you'd think these mean basically the same thing, right? You're in a hospital bed, getting treated by doctors, eating terrible hospital food, watching nurses come in every 2 hours. But here's the catch. If you're under observation status, Medicare won't cover your stay the same way. So patients can spend 3 entire days in a hospital bed, getting the exact same care as an admitted patient in the room next door, and then get slapped with a bill for thousands of dollars because technically the hospital was just observing you. Great system we've got here. And hospitals know exactly what they're doing, because the decision to keep you in observation status for 47 hours instead of admitting you at hour 24, that's not a medical decision. That's a strategic billing decision made by hospital administrative Medicare reimbursement rates. But it gets better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. The average hospital markup on basic supplies is absolutely bonkers. A single acetaminophen pill, which you can buy at any CVS for about 2 cents, gets billed at $15 in a hospital. That's a 750 times markup. A bag of saline solution that costs the hospital maybe $1 to purchase gets billed at $500 to $800 on your itemized statement. It's literally salt water, the same stuff that's in the ocean. Get this. One guy in California went to the emergency room at Sutter Health because he cut his finger chopping vegetables and needed a few stitches. Basic procedure, in and out in under an hour. The bill? $2,200. Another woman at NYU Langone gave birth and got charged $40 for immediate skin-to-skin contact with her own baby. They literally charged her to hold her own child right after delivery. That's comforting. And hospitals don't just mark up supplies. They order unnecessary tests because those tests are wildly profitable. Need an MRI? That'll be $3,000 to $6,000, depending on which hospital you go to. And if one test shows something even slightly abnormal, they'll order 3 more tests. Not because you medically need them, because each test generates revenue and the billing department needs to hit its quarterly targets. The emergency room is especially brutal. You go in thinking your insurance will cover it, but surprise, the ER doctor treating you isn't actually employed by the hospital. They're an independent contractor working for a separate staffing company, and that company isn't in your insurance network. So even though you deliberately went to an in-network hospital, you're getting billed out of network rates by the doctor, which can be literally 10 times higher. That's like if you went to McDonald's, ordered a Big Mac, and then found out the person who assembled your burger was a freelance burger artist, charging $300, and those billing games are just the setup. Because the real trap kicks in after you think you've gotten better and gone home. So you've survived the hospital stay, the infections, the unnecessary tests, the surprise billing. You've made it through, and now the doctors say you're ready to go home. Except here's where things get truly nightmare-inducing, because hospitals are spectacularly bad at the whole sending you home safely part of healthcare. The average patient spends about 15 minutes with a discharge nurse. 15 minutes to learn how to manage multiple medications, understand warning signs of complications, schedule follow-up appointments, and coordinate any home care you might need. That's less time than it takes to watch a single episode of Friends. And in those 15 minutes, you're getting handed a stack of prescriptions, some of which might interact dangerously with your existing medications, along with vague instructions like take as needed or follow up with your primary care doctor in 2 weeks. And here's the kicker. About 20% of Medicare patients end up right back in the hospital within 30 days of discharge. 1 in 5. That's insanely high for a system that's supposedly designed to heal people. And it's not random bad luck or unpredictable complications. It's because hospitals are systematically rushing people out the door before they're actually ready to manage at home. Take heart failure patients, for example. They get discharged with a completely new medication regimen, strict dietary restrictions about sodium intake, and instructions to monitor their weight every single day because weight gain means fluid retention. But nobody actually sits down and explains how to do any of this. So they go home, get confused about which pills to take, when, eat the wrong foods because they don't understand food labels, don't notice the warning signs, and boom, 3 weeks later they're back in the ER with fluid in their lungs, unable to breathe. And here's where the system gets really twisted. Medicare actually penalizes hospitals financially for excessive readmissions. If too many patients come back within 30 days, the hospital loses money on future Medicare reimbursements. You'd think this would motivate hospitals to do way better discharge planning and follow-up care, right? But here's the problem. Readmissions also generate massive revenue. Every time someone comes back to the hospital, that's another entire hospital stay to bill for. Another round of tests, treatments, medications. So hospitals are caught between two competing financial incentives, get penalized for readmissions on one hand, or lose out on all that treatment revenue on the other. Guess which incentive usually wins? The post-acute care gap is absolutely massive. Once you walk out those hospital doors, you're basically on your own. No home nurse visits to check on you. No phone calls from the hospital to make sure you understand your medications or that your prescriptions got filled correctly. Just a stack of confusing discharge papers and a good luck with everything. And if you're elderly, living alone, or don't speak English fluently, you're especially screwed. One elderly woman in Ohio named Dorothy was sent home after hip replacement surgery with 6 new medications, no clear instructions anyone could understand, and a follow-up appointment scheduled 3 weeks out. She fell at home just 2 days after discharge because one of the pain medications made her dizzy, and nobody had warned her about that side effect. Broke her other hip in the fall. Back to the hospital. Great system we've got here. And while these traps catch thousands of people every single day, there's one specific trap that's even more insane. One that can turn a single hospital visit into a decade-long financial nightmare that destroys families. This is where it gets truly scary, because all those traps we just talked about, the infections, the billing games, the readmissions, they're nothing compared to the medical bankruptcy trap, which is when a single hospital visit financially destroys you for years or even decades. Here's the scale of this nightmare. An estimated 530,000 American families file for bankruptcy every single year primarily due to medical bills. That's more than 500,000 families. And we're not talking about people who are already broke or living paycheck to paycheck. We're talking about solidly middle-class families with full-time jobs and health insurance who got completely wiped out financially by one medical emergency they had zero control over. Let me give you a specific example. Sarah Mitchell, a 42-year-old high school English teacher in Columbus, Ohio, had health insurance through her school district. Good insurance, actually. Then she got diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. She needed surgery, 6 months of chemotherapy, and 30 sessions of radiation, all standard medically necessary treatment. Her insurance covered a lot of it, but between co-pays, deductibles, out-of-network charges from specialists, and medications that weren't on her formulary, she ended up with $180,000 in medical debt, on a teacher's salary of $55,000 a year. And here's how the trap works. It's like quicksand. First, you get sick. Obviously, you get treated because what else are you going to do? Die? The alternative isn't really an option. Then the bills start arriving. Thousands of dollars? Then tens of thousands. You try to negotiate with the hospital billing department, but they're not interested in payment plans you can actually afford. They want their money. So you start putting bills on credit cards. That's step 1 of the trap. Step 2 is when those credit cards max out. The interest rates are eating you alive at 18% or 22%. You're juggling minimum payments across multiple cards, and you're still getting more medical bills because cancer treatment doesn't happen in one visit. It's months of appointments, scans, lab work, medications. So now you're taking out personal loans. Maybe borrowing against your 401k retirement account and paying penalties. Maybe taking a second mortgage on your house. Step 3 is when everything collapses. You can't make the payments anymore. Collections agencies start calling your phone 6 times a day. Your credit score tanks from 720 to 480. You can't refinance anything, can't get new credit, and you still owe $150,000 to various hospitals, doctors, labs, and collection companies. It's like getting a credit card to pay off a credit card to pay off a loan to pay off medical debt. Except the original medical debt was for something you had absolutely zero control over. And the really messed up part? This entire trap is by design. Hospitals know most people can't afford their bills. They're counting on it because once you're in collections, they can garnish your wages directly from your paycheck, put liens on your house, and pursue you legally for years. The system is literally built to extract every possible dollar from sick people, even if it financially ruins them for a decade. About 66% of all bankruptcies in America have medical bills as a contributing factor. Two-thirds. That means if you personally know 3 people who filed for bankruptcy, odds are at least 2 of them did it, partly because they or a family member got sick. And the really messed up part, there are dozens of versions of this trap, each one specifically designed to catch different types of patients. From nursing home patients to new mothers, to chronic pain sufferers to cancer patients, these traps are absolutely everywhere. And the scary part? They're specifically designed to catch people at their most vulnerable moments when they have the least ability to fight back or make rational decisions. Let's start with the elderly care trap, which is basically just a revolving door between nursing homes and hospitals. An 85-year-old woman falls at her assisted living facility, gets sent to the hospital, receives treatment for a broken hip, then gets sent right back to the nursing home. 3 weeks later, she develops pneumonia from being bedridden, back to the hospital. Then a urinary tract infection from the catheter, back to the hospital. This cycle can repeat for months, racking up hundreds of thousands in medical bills while the patient gets progressively weaker with each trip. About 25% of nursing home residents end up hospitalized at least once per year, and studies show that many of those hospitalizations were completely preventable with better care at the facility. But facilities don't have the staff or resources, so they just ship people to the ER whenever anything goes slightly wrong. Then there's the new mother trap. The United States has one of the highest C-section rates in the developed world at around 32%, and while some C-sections are absolutely medically necessary and life-saving, studies suggest that about half of them aren't medically required. But C-sections are significantly more profitable for hospitals than vaginal births, plus they're more convenient for scheduling. And here's the kicker. Once you have one C-section, many doctors will push hard for repeat C-sections in all future pregnancies, even though VBAC, vaginal birth after cesarean, is often safer for low-risk women. So one unnecessary surgery can affect every single future pregnancy you have. The chronic pain trap is especially brutal. You go to your doctor with legitimate back pain from a work injury. They prescribe you opioids, OxyContin, Percocet, something strong. The opioids work great for a while, but then your body builds tolerance and you need higher doses to get the same pain relief. Before you know it, 6 months later, you're physically dependent on these pills. And when doctors finally realize you're addicted, or when new DEA regulations come down, instead of helping you taper off safely over months, they cut you off completely cold turkey. Now you're in severe withdrawal, still in legitimate pain from the original injury, and potentially facing criminal charges if you try to get pills from another source. An estimated 2 million Americans are currently dealing with opioid addiction that started with a completely legitimate prescription from a doctor. Mental health traps are a whole other nightmare. Involuntary psychiatric holds can keep you locked in a hospital psych ward for days or weeks against your will, and you're getting billed thousands of dollars per day for the privilege of being held prisoner. One woman in Florida named Melissa went to an ER and told them she was feeling suicidal after a bad breakup. They put her on an involuntary 72-hour hold for her safety. Then they extended it for another week because they claimed she was still a danger to herself. When she finally got released, she had a $28,000 bill waiting for her. That's comforting. The cancer treatment trap preys directly on people's desperation and fear of death. Experimental treatments that haven't been proven effective in clinical trials get marketed as cutting-edge options that might save your life. Patients spend their entire life savings, $200,000, $300,000, on treatments that might extend their life by 3 or 4 months while completely destroying their quality of life with horrible side effects. And hospitals don't exactly discourage this because experimental cancer treatments are incredibly profitable. There's no price ceiling on hope. All these traps share one thing in common. They exploit people when they're scared, vulnerable, in pain, and have no real choice or ability to negotiate. And the system profits massively from keeping people trapped in endless cycles of treatment. So after all that, you're probably wondering the obvious question. How the hell do you avoid these traps? And is there anyone actually trying to fix this nightmare? Alright, so here's what you actually can do to protect yourself and your family. And I'm not going to lie to you, it's not fair that you have to become a hospital expert and a medical billing specialist just to avoid getting screwed. But until the system fundamentally changes, these strategies can actually save you thousands of dollars and potentially save your life. First rule: Never go to the hospital alone if you can possibly help it. Bring someone, a family member, a close friend, literally anyone who can be your patient advocate. Studies from Johns Hopkins show that patients with advocates physically present get better medical care and catch significantly more mistakes before they cause harm. Your advocate's entire job is simple. Take detailed notes, ask questions about everything, and make sure nobody does any procedure or gives any medication without clearly explaining what it is and why it's necessary first. Speaking of questions, here are the specific ones you need to ask before agreeing to any procedure or test. Is this actually medically necessary? Or are we just being extra cautious? What happens if we wait a week and see how things develop? What are the specific risks versus the specific benefits? Are there less invasive treatment options we could try first? And the biggest question that doctors hate but you need to ask anyway, how much is this going to cost me out of pocket after my insurance pays their portion? Watch for these red flags. If a doctor is rushing you to make a decision right now without giving you time to think, that's a huge red flag. If they can't clearly explain in plain English why you need a test or procedure, that's a red flag. If they're being deliberately vague about costs or saying, we'll figure that out later, that's a major red flag. You have the legal right to slow down and think, even in most emergency situations. Don't let anyone pressure you into rushed decisions about your own body. Always, and I mean always, demand an itemized bill. Not the summary statement, the actual line-by-line breakdown showing every single charge. Then go through that bill with a fine-tooth comb because hospitals make billing errors on roughly 80% of medical bills, according to some estimates. Challenge anything that looks even slightly weird or wrong. That $15 acetaminophen pill? Dispute it. That mysterious facility fee that's $3,000. Make them explain exactly what that covers. Most hospitals will reduce or remove charges if you push back hard enough. Before you ever have an emergency, sit down and actually know your insurance policy inside and out. What's your annual deductible? What's your out-of-pocket maximum? Which hospitals in your area are in-network versus out-of-network? Which specialist doctors are covered? Because in an actual emergency at 2 a.m., you will not have time to figure any of this out, and one wrong ambulance ride to an out-of-network hospital can cost you $50,000. Get second opinions for anything serious, anything that involves surgery, long-term medication, significant risks, or costs over $10,000. Another doctor at a different hospital might have a completely different approach that's safer, less invasive, or way less expensive. And most insurance companies will actually pay for second opinion consultations because it saves them money in the long run. And if you're getting discharged from the hospital, demand a crystal clear discharge plan in writing. What medications, what exact doses, when to take them, what specific warning signs to watch for, and exactly who to call if something goes wrong. Organizations like the Patient Advocate Foundation and the Patient Safety Movement Foundation are doing real advocacy work trying to fix this system. Some states have significantly better consumer protections than others. California, for example, has stronger rules about surprise billing and balance billing that other states don't have yet. It's not perfect. You absolutely shouldn't have to do all this work. But right now, being informed and being willing to be assertively advocate for yourself can literally save your life and save you from bankruptcy. But even with all these strategies and precautions, the reality is that the system itself fundamentally needs to change. And when you actually look at the numbers, the scale of this problem becomes even more insane. So let's put this all in perspective, because when you actually look at the numbers and compare the American healthcare system to literally any other developed country, the scale of this problem is absolutely staggering. Medical errors kill an estimated 250,000 Americans every single year. That makes hospital errors the third leading cause of death in the United States, behind only heart disease and cancer. It kills more people than strokes, more than respiratory disease, more than accidents, and more than Alzheimer's combined. Think about that for just a second. You are statistically more likely to die from a preventable hospital mistake than you are to die in a car crash on the highway. But deaths are just one part of the story. Every year, about 1 in 4 hospitalized patients, that's 25% of everyone who stays overnight in a hospital, experiences some kind of preventable harm during their stay. We're talking about hospital-acquired infections, medication errors, surgical complications, diagnostic mistakes, or other screw-ups that simply should not have happened if basic protocols had been followed. The financial impact is even more completely insane. Medical bankruptcies affect over 500,000 families every single year in America. Healthcare costs account for roughly 18% of America's entire GDP, which works out to about $4.3 trillion per year, and a huge chunk of that is pure waste. Unnecessary procedures that don't improve outcomes, billing fraud and upcoding, administrative bloat that has nothing to do with actual patient care. Now compare that to literally any other developed country. In most of Europe, in Canada, in Australia and Japan, people simply do not go bankrupt from medical bills. It doesn't happen. Their healthcare costs per person are literally half, sometimes less than half of what Americans pay. And their health outcomes, in most measurable categories, they're actually better than ours. They live longer. Their infant mortality rates are lower. Their rates of preventable deaths are way lower. Some things are slowly improving, to be fair. Hospital-acquired infection rates have dropped about 30% over the past decade thanks to better hand hygiene protocols and infection control measures. New price transparency laws are starting to force hospitals to actually publish their prices online, where patients can see them before getting treated. A few states like California and New York have banned certain types of surprise billing, but here's what hasn't changed at all and is actually getting worse. Medical bankruptcy rates are still climbing every single year. Insurance deductibles keep going up while coverage gets worse. The financial traps are getting more sophisticated and harder to escape, not easier. And the fundamental underlying problem remains exactly the same. American healthcare is structurally designed to maximize profit for hospitals and insurance companies, not to maximize actual health outcomes for patients. Remember that readmission cycle we talked about earlier, where people get sent home too early and end up right back in the hospital within 30 days? That trap alone catches about 3 million patients every single year, and that's just one specific trap out of dozens we've covered. Right now, as you're watching this video, someone somewhere in America is getting hit with a surprise medical bill for $50,000 that they have absolutely no ability to pay. Someone else is being readmitted to a hospital because they got discharged way too early without proper instructions. And someone is filing for bankruptcy right now because they had the audacity to get cancer or have a heart attack. The system will not fix itself. It's working exactly as designed, for hospitals and insurance companies anyway. And if you think hospital billing is complicated and predatory, wait until you see the insane ways insurance companies systematically deny legitimate claims. But I guess we'll save that investigation for another video.